Photoshop. Welcome to lesson number 7, the penultimate lesson of module 1. Great to have you all back for this lesson. And before we get into it, I've got a few questions and a few, I suppose, tests that I wanted to do with you in relation to this lesson. Let me ask you, first of all, why do you think Photoshop looks the way it does? Did you know that you can actually change the interface from black to dark grey to light grey to white? But why in particular do we use these colors? And you'll see this right across the board when it comes to Adobe programs. If you're used to using Lightroom, Illustrator, InDesign, any of them, they all use a very similar color scheme, a very similar template. And why not something a little bit more colorful? Well, you might know the answer to this already, but let's have a look at a few examples of how we perceive color. Now, I am sure that you have seen this one already. I don't even need to bring it up. I'm sure if I ask you what color is the dress, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And of course, this went viral a number of years ago because created this huge sensation online as to what color is the dress. Is it black or white, or is it blue and black? Sorry, is it white and gold, or is it blue and black? Okay, so I'm sure you're all frantically typing in their way saying, I see white and gold, or I see blue and black. Personally, I see a kind of a light blue with black. I can also see the gold a little bit in the black as well. I cannot see the white at all. I've never been able to see the white at all. But it brought up a lot of questions about how we perceive color. Let's have a look at some other examples. So here we have two birds. And are these birds the same color? So just quick yes or no. I know the resolution's not great on the image, but are these birds the same color? Does the bird at the top appear more blue? Does the bird at the bottom appear more yellow? And if we remove the backgrounds, we can see that they are absolutely the same color. So just taking one step back here, we can see that the gradient around the birds here, this blue to yellow, is really influencing how we perceive the color of the birds. Okay, so the outside colors, the external colors here, are really affecting how we visualize the birds. And similarly then with this final one, are the orange bars on the right darker than the ones on the left? Okay, so the orange bars here on the right, do these appear darker than the ones on the left? And certainly to my eyes, these orange ones appear darker, just a little bit grayer, a little bit darker than the ones here on the left hand side. But if we remove the green bars, they are of course the exact same. Okay, so we appear, to our eyes, these orange ones appear to be a little bit more shadowy, a little bit darker because of the dark green bars on the top and the bottom of them. Okay, when they're in the green, we've got the white surrounding them, so that gives them a brighter appearance. And again, if we remove them, we see that they're the exact same. And this is really important to be aware of, that our eyes can still be tricked. And we can actually experience something that's called color fatigue when we're looking at colors for too long. And this is why our Photoshop and our other Adobe programs are all these kind of neutral colors. These dark grays, these light grays, these whites, these blacks, because it helps us to visualize colors a little bit easier and to ensure that we don't suffer from color fatigue. Very, very relevant and very important to be aware of in this lesson. So you are here with myself, William Eames, your course educator. If you want to find out more about these kind of color perception tests and that, do certainly check out Google. I'll also share some links at the very end of the lesson for you to do a couple of tests as well. Some really tough tests when it comes to color. But well worth doing and well worth spending a little bit of time just to gain a little bit more awareness around color. Something that we probably take for granted. And certainly, if you're colorblind as well, there are ways that you can still use Adobe Photoshop too. And I'll include some links to that as well at the very end of the lesson. So just a quick reminder, if you haven't downloaded the app at this stage, do download it. It's the best way to enjoy the lessons and indeed to go back over the recordings And of course, if you have any questions or any issues or any problems at all, please do remember to type into Morpheus. And remember to keep rating those responses so that we can continually improve them. So we are on to lesson number 7, which is going to be all about color editing. And color editing is also going to be key to how we can create better black and white photographs as well. So actually understanding colors will help us to understand tones much better, which means we're actually going to be able to edit our black and white photographs better as well through having a greater understanding of color. So before we get into Photoshop, we're going to need to talk all about color theory. And color theory, simplified, basically relates to how different colors work together. And if you're a designer, you'll certainly be familiar with color theory. And it's to ensure that we choose colors that work in harmony together, that look correct to our eyes, because we make subconscious decisions about whether we like something or not based on color. And color represents lots of different things in lots of different cultures as well. So it's really, really important to be aware of. And you may have come across this before. It's used very, very frequently. It is a color wheel. It's used in design. It's used to help us select the correct paints if we're decorating our room. But it can also be used for photography as well, and choosing the right colors when we're setting up, say, studio shots, and at the post-editing stage as well, to maybe bring out the best colors within our image. So we'll break this down now in just a moment. But the first thing to understand is that color exists all around us. Physical objects, when struck by light, the visible kind of light, the light that we can see, not ultraviolet light or infrared, but visible light, it'll reflect back certain wavelengths to our eyes. So, for example, pure white light, which is made up of all the colors within the spectrum, hits an object like this. It hits an apple. All the wavelengths are absorbed except for red. And the red is reflected back off the object, reflected off this apple, and that is what allows us to see the color red. It's the only color that's reflected back to us. So this is the color that we attribute to the apple. So when you're looking at an object and you see the color that is in front of you, that is the only color that are a combination of wavelengths as well, that isn't being absorbed by the object, which allows us to see the color. Now, when you're looking at a monitor of any kind, or indeed when you're taking a photograph as well on a digital camera, these capture and display light in a much different way. So because they generate their own light, they must generate their own color as well. So what a monitor does, it generates white light. When all colors are combined together, they create white light. Okay, this is known as additive color. So we add red, we add green, we add blue together, and these will all combined will make white light. If we only add red and we only add blue, we get magenta. If we only add green and we only add blue, we get cyan. We add red, we add green, we get yellow. All of these colors combined, though, will create white light. And this is how we see as well. So these are the different wavelengths of light. Okay, so just make that distinction. White light is the primary colors of white light are red, green, and blue, or RGB. The primary colors of pigments, like the color wheel, which we're going to come back to now in a moment, is red, blue, and yellow. Okay, so slightly different. So red, blue, and yellow when we talk about pigments, but it's RGB, red, green, and blue when we talk about white light. Okay, so that's just something to be aware of. In practice, it's not really going to make a huge difference, okay? But if you are talking to somebody about the primary colors, you want to make sure that you're distinguishing between what the primary colors of light are and the primary colors of hue or pigment are. So coming back to our color wheel. So color wheel is basically a nifty little tool that we can use to visualize what colors work together. Okay, so similarly to how our RGB works, when we combine colors together, they will produce other colors. Now remember, we're dealing with hues and pigment here. So imagine you had a load of paint in front of you and you're mixing the colors together. This is the kind of concept, the idea when we're using this type of color wheel. Our primary colors, as we've mentioned, are red, yellow and blue. And by combining red and yellow, our red and blue, our yellow and blue, we get our secondary colors. So for example, if we combine blue and yellow, we get green. If we combine red and yellow, we get orange. We combine red and blue, we get violet. And when we combine our secondary colors with our primary colors, we also then get our tertiary colors as well. Okay. Complementary color is a really good place to start when it comes to figuring out what colors you should be using in your designs, or what colors you want to really stand out within your photographs. Okay, a very popular one at the moment is kind of blue and orange. Okay, so you'll see this a lot in movie posters. It's really popular at the moment. But blue and orange, so we can see that they're opposites on the color wheel. So they're complementary colors. They work very well together. We also have what are known as analogous colors too. And these are colors that appear beside each other on the color wheel. So we've got a combination here, primary colors and secondary colors, and we've got two tertiary colors here as well. Analogous colors are basically any colors that appear beside each other on the color wheel. So for example, you could go with your violet red, your violet, your blue violet, and your blues. These are all going to work together. Okay, so there's a load of different combinations and variations we can use. There's also what's known as rectangular color. So you can visualize that here. We have 4 colors used here, basically making a rectangle shape on the color wheel. So we've got all tertiary colors in this particular case. So we've got red, orange, violet, red, green, blue, and yellow, green. And you can see these are kind of complementary, contrasting colors as well. But like a rectangular type of shape here, these colors are all going to work. So color theory and the color wheel, we go much more in detail into this on a number of our courses. Our graphic design course, our photography course, look at the color wheel in much greater detail. But it's just important to be familiar with it at this stage when it comes to thinking about your designs. But as I said as well, as we're going to see, when we're editing our photographs too, we can also apply color theory. And there's a lot of psychology, as we know, behind colors as well. Colors mean a lot to us when it comes to things like emotions and what we take away, what we perceive from an image. And the color wheel is kind of split into 2 primary sections. We have our warm colors here over on the left hand side. So we've got our reds, our yellows, our oranges. These are all warm colors that are quite positive colors. But then we've got our colder, cooler colors here over on the right hand side, our darker colors, our kind of green colors that will give a different feel, a different look to our photographs and to our images. Finally then, just another thing to be aware of when it comes to color theory are just a couple of other terminologies. So when we talk about hue, like we've talked about hue and saturation, hue is a pure color. It's the color as it appears on the spectrum. But we can change the hue of a color by adding things like tints, shades and tones. So if we add a little bit of white to a color, we're adding a tint to it, we're brightening it up ever so slightly. If we add a little bit of darkness to it, we're adding a shade to a color. And if we add a little bit of tone, we're adding grey to it. And tone is going to be very important when we're speaking in terms of black and white imagery as well. But let's put all of this into practice and have a look at how all of this is going to work within Photoshop. Now, so here we are back in Photoshop once again. We've got our color wheel, slightly different with the yellow at the top here, but the exact same principles that are applying. And let's begin to edit and make some changes to this, because I want you to I suppose see this in action and begin to understand it a little bit more. So we've spoken about using hue and saturation before. So if we click our hue and saturation over in our adjustment layers, we can begin to change the colors, the hues of our color wheel. Okay, now we can also click this down and just focus on things like the reds. If you just want to change the reds, if you want to change the blues and everything like that, we can do all of that here. But there is a much better way to do this rather than going through our hue and saturation. And within Photoshop, we've got a very, very powerful tool called our Camera Raw filter. Okay, so Camera Raw basically is designed to edit raw photographs, raw images captured on a camera, okay, which we go into great detail into on our photography course. But basically, we can also use it then within Photoshop to edit our photographs and our images as well. So you find it in the filter option, you click it off, it'll just take a moment now for it to open, and we're met with an interface like this. Okay, so there's a lot going on here in itself. Now, this is a great way to edit your photographs too, is to use Camera Raw. So you're going to see a lot of kind of familiar tools available to us over on the right hand side. We can change the color temperature of our images here. We can add a tint to it again just to correct any kind of issues we have with the white balance. We've got our exposure, we've got our contrast. All of these are basically what we're going to find with our different adjustment layers. Okay, so you can use those to refine and to edit your image. We've got some tools going across the top here as well. We can zoom in. We've got our hand tool. We have a white balance selection tool as well. All of these tools, again, go into great detail into them on our photography course, and we'll have a look at them in greater detail in later modules on this course as well. But for now, I want to come across to our different options here. So just below our histogram here at the top, okay, which is a very unusual looking histogram just because of the nature of this image. But if we come across the top, we have this option here called HSL adjustments. So we click this off and we've got hue, saturation and luminance. So hue, as we now know, is the pure color within our images. Saturation is the overall saturation, like how intense the color is. We can also desaturate it by reducing down these color sliders as well to remove the color from them altogether. Okay, and luminance is the brightness or the darkness of the color. Okay, so the brightness or the darkness of the color. So for example, if I reduce the reds down, I could make the reds much darker. If I increase the luminance, I'm increasing the brightness of the color, I can make it much brighter. Okay, so what we can do using our hue, saturation and luminance is that we can change the colors so that they closely match other colors beside them. So what I mean by that is, if for example, if I begin to modify the reds, again, if we have a look at the reds, basically it goes by how they're arranged on the color wheel. So you can see here, if I move the reds over here to the right, the reds become more orange because they're beside them on the color wheel. If I move the oranges down, they're going to become more reds. Okay, I could go with the yellows and turn the yellows more green. I could turn the greens more yellow and so on, because basically you're matching the color that's beside it on the color wheel. Okay, and that can be very, very beneficial, as we're going to see in a moment when we start editing a color photograph. Our saturation, as I mentioned, we can reduce the saturation of colors if we want to. We can increase the saturation of colors if we want to make colors stand out. Okay, this isn't the best way of doing a color pop image. We'll have a look at how to do that a little bit later on. Okay, but that's one way that we can do it. And then, as I said, the luminance we can then use to add brightness or darkness to our colors, and this will allow us to separate our colors a little bit more. Okay, so we can add contrast to our colors by changing the brightness and the darkness of our colors. Where this becomes very, very important is when we get to our black and white editing. Okay, so just resetting everything here and reducing the saturation down of all of the colors here, we're going to notice that, well, when we take away colors, that the tones that we're left with are actually all very similar. Okay, and this becomes a big issue when we do black and white editing. So think about this. If I have an image, a photograph that has a lot of oranges and yellows in it, the image is going to be looking very flat because these tones are very, very similar. So when I remove the colors altogether, it's impossible for us to tell what the color was originally. All we're left with is tone, And we can see that a lot of these tones are really similar to each other, and this really presents a problem when we're working in black and white, because our images will then end up looking flat and lacking contrast. Now, absolutely, we can come back to our contrast option and just simply increase the contrast there, but it's not the best way, it's not the most effective way of doing it. So if I come to my luminance then, back in my HSL adjustments, and I begin to separate the tones this way, I can actually add contrast that way. Okay, so that's another way that we can do it, is actually to separate the contrast, the tones this way, by increasing and decreasing the luminance sliders. Okay, so we're going to have a look at how to apply that to a black and white image a little bit later on. Okay, but for now, let's park that. We'll just cancel out of that altogether, and let's use our camera raw filter to work on this photograph here to bring out the colors in the greens and in the oranges in this image. So this is a photograph that I shot myself. So we come back up to our filter option, we come to our camera raw filter. Just take a moment for it to open up within camera raw, and let's begin to do some changes. In the interests of time, I'm going to do quite a few changes to this quickly, in terms of just the exposure adjustments and so on, which, you know, we've kind of already gone through when we talk about our adjustment layers and that, but it's just a slightly different interface that we're using. So I've just set the white balance there. I set it off the road because it's a neutral grey, so you want to set your white balance off something neutral in the photograph if possible. If not, if it isn't there, you can also just go auto, or you can just dial it in manually there as well. The exposure here is fine. I'm going to add a bit of contrast there to it, so we're going to bang that up to about 25. I'm going to bring some detail back by reducing the highlights. Sorry, we clicked shadows there. We want to reduce the highlights to bring some detail back there. Shadows, will increase those to bring some detail there as well. Reduce the whites down. Actually, we'll reduce the blacks in and increase the whites. That'll add a little bit more contrast to it there as well. Okay, we'll add a tiny little bit of clarity there to it. That increases mid-tone contrast, just to give it a little bit more of a punch. I'm going to increase the vibrance, but I'm going to decrease the saturation. Okay, so vibrance will help to level out all of the weaker colors in the image, to bring them up a little bit so that they're as strong as the stronger colors in the photograph. Saturation just reduces the overall intensity. We can just do a quick before and after just to see how that's looking already. So I'm happy enough with how that is for now. Okay, so now I want to go and I want to start making some changes to the colors. So we're going to come to our HSL adjustment, and I'm going to have a look at the oranges and the reds. So this is taken quite recently, late autumn here, early winter. So I want to try and bring out those oranges as much as possible. Now, if I reduce them down here to the left, you can see that they're becoming more reds. Okay, don't quite like the look at that. If I go the other way, they become more yellow. So where the oranges are is actually preferable for now, but what I can do instead is I can change the reds, increase those reds a little bit more, just to bring a little bit more orange here. The yellows we can begin to manipulate. You can see there's a huge impact when I start to change the yellows, so we can make everything a little bit more autumnal that way, or I can go the other way and I can bring in a little bit more green into the image, which is, I think, what I want to do. I like this contrast between the green and the oranges here. So the green at the top of the kind of photograph and then the oranges at the bottom. So I'm going to increase that a little bit. You can also change the greens here as well. I can bring them down and make them a little bit more yellow. You see, it kind of gives almost a sepia type of look to the image. But we'll go the other way and we'll just pop up those greens a little bit more. Now, there's very little blue, there's very little magenta and purples in the photograph, okay? So you can tweak those if you like, but I can see that there's no impact there whatsoever, okay? So we've got a little bit of separation there now happening between our oranges and between our greens, okay? So the oranges could still be a little bit more intense for my liking. So this is where we go and we come to our saturation. So coming to the saturation, I can increase the saturation of those oranges a little bit. Okay. And I could also decrease the saturation of those greens. You can see we get quite, this is very in vogue as well at the moment, having these kind of neutral or these kind of desaturated greens in an image. But we're not going to do that. We'll increase those greens a little bit as well to make those two colours really stand out. They're the two dominant colours within the photograph. Everything else there kind of remain where it is. We might just add a little bit more of a boost to those reds. And again, let's just do a quick before and after. Excellent. I'm really beginning to like how that is looking. Okay, so you can see how we can use our hue and saturation there to specifically work on the dominant colors within an image, just to bring them out a little bit more. We could also go a little bit further. We could change the hue and the luminance, I should say, here as well. So we could make those greens a little bit darker. I do want to kind of add a little bit more mood to it. You don't want to go too far, because if you go too far, you're going to flatten them out altogether, and it's just going to kill the photograph. So you want to just go subtle when it comes to the luminance. So I'm going to decrease the greens a little bit, and we're going to, we'll add a little bit of a pop there to those oranges, just ever so slightly, and again just a little bit to the reds there as well. Okay, so you can see how quickly I did that by just adjusting my hue, saturation and luminance, and I am happy with how that is looking now. I could do a lot more to this photograph in terms of the editing, a very, very quick edit there. But beside our hue and saturation and luminance, we also have what's called split toning. Split toning will allow us to add colours to just the highlights and the shadows within an image. And this is where, again, you're going to want to be thinking about your colour wheel and how colours work together, particularly complementary colours and analogous colours as well. So if I have a look at the highlights, let's say just for argument's sake, I pick blue in my highlights. Okay, we're going to increase the blue. It's going to add a little bit of blue within to the brightest parts of the photograph. Now I'm just exaggerating it here now, and you can see it's very much coming into the road here. So I'll just decrease that there again. So we're adding a little bit of coldness there to the highlights. I could balance that, or I could offset that by adding a little bit of yellow then to the shadows. So yellow and blue, they would be complementary somewhat as well. And again, if I increase the intensity there, you can see now I've added a bit of tone to the image. A bit of yellow and blue there. I could change that. I could also add blue to the shadows, or I could reduce the highlights there to yellow. And you can see now we've got an aged type of look to the shot. And almost kind of a film quality, a film color to the image as well. So split toning is very, very popular. And what were the two colors we mentioned earlier that were very, very popular? Orange was one and blue was another. Okay, so orange, we could go all the way down here, and maybe it's a little bit intense there, so we could reduce it down a little bit, and we could also reduce the blue down there as well. Again, that's moved very, very frequently, as we said in movie posters. Maybe we'll go the other way and go orange in the shadows and blue in the highlights. You could change the balance here as well of that by adjusting your balance slider. So if you reduce it down to the left, that's going to increase the shadow intensity color, or you could go the other way and it's going to increase the highlight intensity color. So it adds a little bit more to your images. So I think we're going to go we'll increase the intensity of the green in the shadows, and we'll increase the intensity of the oranges in the highlights. Okay, actually maybe we'll go the other way. It's not working too well there. Okay, so it needs a little bit more tweaking there to get right. I mean, there's nothing saying that you have to add any type of split toning to the image there at all. Okay, we'll add a little bit to the shadows, but we'll leave everything else pretty much the way it is. Okay, a little bit of warmth there in the highlights as well. Okay, so let's have a quick final look at the before and after there. So it's certainly looking a lot more autumnal now. So if you're happy with that, then all you have to do is click OK. That commits the changes and it brings it back here into Photoshop. so that you can then continue to work away on this if you wanted to do more adjustments, if you wanted to add more adjustment layers to it, if you felt that you still needed to do a little bit of work to the overall exposure of the image, or whatever else it is that you want to use this image for. But for now, I'm happy enough with that. It's maybe a little bit too intense, with the split toning. Probably could have done without it and just left it the way it was with the hue and saturation editing. But I think you get the overall idea. So let's move on to a black and white image and start editing black and white. Now, so before we do anything when black and white editing, I want to show you how to do a color pop on an image. Now, at this stage, you may have actually already done one of these yourself, and I mean, it's very, very simple to do. I mean, there's a number of ways that we can do this, mainly just through using selection tools. So it's very straightforward. We can choose our quick selection tool. Okay, I'm just going to quickly draw around this flower here, and then we can make a brand new layer. So I'm just going to go and we can make a mask, or we could just make a new layer via copy. We'll do that exactly, and just switch that off. Now, okay, the selection could do with a little bit more refining, but it's okay for now. So choosing the background, then we can desaturate it. So when we have our image selected, we could go to our adjustments and we could just simply choose our black and white option here. There we go. Couldn't be any easier than that. Okay, and then of course there's a couple of presets there that you can kind of go through as well if you wanted to change how the background looks, but we'll just leave it as is for the moment. So very, very easy to do. Just simply select the object that you want, you can select and mask it, recommend making a new layer, and then you can just simply desaturate the background. There is another way to desaturate the background as well. If you don't want to use an adjustment layer, you can come up to image, you can go to adjustments, and there is a desaturate option. Control plus shift plus U, or shift plus command plus U if you are using a Mac. Very, very quick, very, very easy to do. So that's how you can do a color pop. Now let's move on to something a little bit more complicated. So for the final part of this lesson, we're going to have a look at doing one of the most fulfilling things that you can do within Photoshop, and that's to do a photo restoration. So if you have any old photographs lying around and you scan them in, via a scanner into your computer, you can then bring them into Photoshop and indeed do a little bit of work on them, like this photograph here. So as we can see now, as photographs go, it isn't actually too badly damaged. It's a little bit dark, and yes, of course, there's a couple of scratches in that we need to work on. So let's do some repairs to this, and the first thing I'd recommend is to crop in, just to remove that frame. Now we can also add a frame afterwards as well, which we will do, but we'll go with a ratio of 2:3, which is your kind of standard 4:6. You can also just click the button there just to quickly turn it to landscape to go 3:2. Okay, we'll just undo that. Just quickly grab in the edges there and make our crop. Okay, so just simply hit enter on that, and there we have our cropped photograph. What I recommend then as well is just bringing this down, making a duplicate layer as always, as this is going to be the layer that we're going to work on. Now, I also recommend that on this layer, we go into our image, we go into adjustments, and we want to desaturate the image. Okay, so Control plus Shift plus U, we can just click it there as well, and that removes any kind of casts or any toning to the image. Now we can add a bit of toning again to the image later on, but I recommend that we try to, for want of a better word, reset the photograph as much as possible. Okay, so we're going to need to do quite a bit of work on this. The next thing I'd recommend is to introduce an adjustment layer, just a simple brightness and contrast one to begin with. In this case, just to add a little bit of brightness, just to make it a little bit easier to see exactly what it is that we're working on. So we'll increase that to about 50. We don't really want to, actually we'll reduce the contrast down a little bit, because I actually can see there, as we reduce the contrast, it's actually helping to bring back a little bit of detail there. So what it does mean is that when we zoom in, So if I just click OK on that again, and we go to our layer, we zoom in, we can see all of the dust and everything like that a little bit clearer. Okay, so a lot of work involved in this now when we get in close and we have a look at the damage. So we're assessing the damage, and well, we just have to get right to it. So we're going to be mainly using our healing brush tools, our patch tool, our content aware, and so on. So we'll start with the healing brush tool, and it really is just a case then of going over the dust and just simply clicking it off. Okay, so I'm obviously not going to do an extensive job on this throughout this lesson because, you know, we are tight for time. You definitely need a bit of time to do this, but it is very, very satisfying work, or at least I find it to be very, very satisfying work. So just click away, simply highlighting any of the dots that you want to remove. Now the crack is definitely going to take a little bit more work. It's okay here. We can just simply drag and drop and just go over using the healing brush. You can actually still see a little bit of it there, so we'll just undo that. We could even make the brush a little bit smaller, or if we wanted to, we could instead use the clone stamp in the clone healing brush instead. So we'll make that a little bit smaller. We'll just clone beside it, okay, and we'll just make sure our opacity and everything like that is normal as well. Clone beside it, and just we can just drag down then, and that's a little bit more effective. Okay, you can see that's you know, it does take a little bit of time to get it right. Okay, now so we won't spend a huge amount of time on that. Trickier parts are going to take a little bit more time to get right. Thankfully, they're you know, where the scratch is in this particular instance, it's not really too bad at all. I think I'll use a bigger brush there. But where it can be very, very difficult when it comes to restorations is when you have to do any facial reconstruction. So that can be very, very tricky indeed. And I'll just fill that in there. Could be a little bit better, but it'll do for now. Let's assess the face here. So, you know, not too bad. We have a bit of an issue that it's not too sharp. Unfortunately, there's no really effective way of making it any sharper than it already is. You can add sharpening to it, but it's not really going to help to reveal much more detail. But here it's not too bad, so we want to get in very, very close again. We're going to use our healing brush, our clone stamp tool. We'll just click off, we'll sample an area underneath the eye. We just go over it there. Okay, so we're going to reduce the opacity there a little bit. I'm actually also going to reduce the hardness of this down significantly as well. And we can just slowly paint in our change. So it's tricky enough, and I would recommend kind of swapping between that and your other tools like your healing brush tool and that as well, just to repair the damage and perhaps even getting in a little bit closer too. Okay, so just paint over that and see how that's looking. Okay, it's a little bit better. Okay, tricky enough for sure. Now, in cases where you might have an extreme tear or rip going across the face, what you will need to try and do is essentially, well, I suppose for want of a better description, a face transplant. So it's a case sometimes that if you're lucky enough to have a second photograph of the person's face that you're trying to repair, you might sample that from a second photograph and essentially bring it over into the photograph that you're working on. If you happen to have one side of the face that seems to be okay, it might be also possible to take that one side of a face and flip it and duplicate it to fill in the rest of the photograph. Okay, so there's a lot of methods that we've kind of covered throughout this course so far that you're going to be basically employing when you are doing this type of work. Just going to do a quick content aware around this. So we just highlight it, you can right click, we go fill, and we select content aware, we just click OK. Oh, that hasn't done a particularly good job. Let's just do that again. So we go right click, go fill, there we go. So we want to go to normal, 100% opacity, so make sure that all your settings are essentially back to default. There we go, that's much better. Okay, so let's just quickly fit that back into screen. So we go to zoom and we go to fit screen. we'll just switch off the changes there. So already with the changes made, we're seeing a big improvement in the quality of the shot. But we definitely want to do a lot more with this. I recommend that we bring in another adjustment layer here. We want to bring in our levels. We want to brighten this up a little bit more using our levels, bring those mid-tones. And the only issue when we do this is, of course, it's going to reveal more damage. Okay, but that's okay. We would spend the time working away on that to get it correct. But I'm much happier with the overall brightness of that image now. So you can continue away to make your changes as you desire, as you prefer. And if you want to then add a little bit of toning to the image, so remove the kind of sepia tone at the start, we can actually bring that back in through our adjustment layers here again. So we've got a couple of ways that we can do this. We could go through and do it through our color balance option, create a new layer, and you want to just reduce the yellow or move towards the yellow, maybe just add a little bit of red. There you go. There's a very quick way of doing it by simply using color balance. Okay. If you don't like that way, we can also do it through adjustments. And if we select our black and white, we can also simply click the tint option here, and you can actually then change the color of the tint again as you prefer. That's another very easy way to do it. Now, our black and white channels won't work here because Photoshop can't accurately assess this image because it was desaturated. Okay, because we've actually desaturated the image. Remember, it was one of the first steps that we took. Photoshop actually can't really make any changes. Now, if I switch off my bottom layer and now I change the channels here, you can see that it is making a difference. Okay, so when we desaturate it, we're really removing all of the color from the image altogether. So you have a choice here on whether or not you want to go and simply use your black and white filter, which is going to allow you to apply these kind of preset filters here if you prefer. Okay, or you can desaturate the image, which will remove all the color from it, giving you a little bit less control over the channels, the different color channels within the image, but it does mean that you're removing any kind of tint or anything like that from the photograph at all. So if you're happy with those changes, we can go into our filter. We can go into our camera raw filter. Okay, there you can see it has the entire image as was, uncropped and without the adjustments applied underneath, but that's okay. So we're not going to make any changes here to the photograph, although indeed again you could if you liked. But what we're going to do within the camera raw filter is we're going to go to our split toning, and we're going to add a little bit of a tint here using the split toning instead. Okay, so I'm going to add a little bit of sepia. I'm going to pick two yellow channels, or two yellows here, and just increase it that way. Maybe just add a little bit of red there to make it a little bit more brown and go a little bit more on the yellow side there. On top of that then, we can come into our effects. I'm going to add a little bit of grain to the image here as well to make it look, more like I suppose it would have been at the time that the picture was taken, with a little bit of grain on it, just to add a little bit of texture to it. So if I zoom in onto the photograph, okay, you can see it's adding the grain. You don't want to go too far with it because it's going to it'll look too soft. Okay, but it just adds a nice effect to it. So we'll reduce the grain down a bit and maybe just increase the size ever so slightly. So happy with those changes. We click OK. Let's just zoom back out on the photograph and see how we're going. Okay, so that's where we started. Okay, we switch on all of our changes, and this is the photograph now. We could continue on with this, add more adjustment filters to brighten it up even more, or if we chose to, you could also just remove those adjustment filters altogether and do all your work through camera raw. But it's safer to work using layers because we can it's much easier to undo any changes or to try out different looks and different styles by adding new layers. Okay, Now, the final thing I want to do here is just bring back a little bit of a frame around the photograph. So if I come up to image, I can go to this option here called canvas size. Okay, well, first of all, we could also check our image size as well, just to confirm the actual size of the image. So you can see the pixels here, you can see the width and the height here as well. And that's just important to take note of when you want to set your canvas size. Okay, so we click OK on that. I'm happy with all of that. I might just have a look at what it is in centimeters just to confirm. Okay, cool. Happy with that. And then I can go into my canvas size. I know my dimensions are right because I just had a look at them there in image size. So all I'm going to do here is I'm going to just change this. I'm going to add a 4 centimeter frame around it. Actually, that's 4 centimeters. Let's try that and see how much that is. So that'll bring that up to 25. That'll bring that up to 18. And it's coming out from the middle. Okay, so you can actually change if you wanted the canvas to just say come out from this side or that side and so on. You can actually change it that way, but of course we want to have it in the center. Okay, so I'm happy with that. I click OK, and there we go. So it's actually added a frame around, but it's transparent. Okay, that's no good to me. Okay, so what I need to do in that case is I need to just undo that. I'm going to have to select all of my layers. So this really should be the final step when you're adding the canvas size. Select all your layers and we're going to flatten our image. Okay, so that'll combine all the layers together, which means that you're not going to be able to work on the image anymore, those separate layers, unless you undo that. So it should really be the last step. Again, you can come into your canvas size. We'll go to 25 on that again. We'll go to 18 on that again. We can now change the color as well of the background if we want, white, black, grey. We'll go with white for now. We'll click OK, and there is our frame. Okay, so obviously we could adjust the size of that then as well. Okay, so still needs obviously a little bit more work. I actually think that it could be still a bit brighter. Just increase those a little bit more, just to make it a little bit brighter. Not hugely mad on that split toning as well, so I could come back in and just add a little bit more yellow to it. Yeah, just add a little bit more yellow to that, but it could also reduce the opacity of that down a little bit as well. Okay, so a little bit more tweaking and that's needed to that image, but I think those results are good enough for now. So a huge amount of fun to work away using doing restorations, and it will basically test all your skills, everything that we have learned in Photoshop so far. But that's the end of this lesson. So we've covered a huge amount in this lesson. So let's just quickly wrap up and have a quick look at what's going to come up in our final lesson of this module, lesson number 8. So hard to believe our next lesson is the final lesson of this module, and it's going to be a tough lesson, but we're going to come out with some very, very cool photos and images at the end of it. First of all, we're going to have a look at how we can do double exposures like the image here. It is what it sounds. It's basically combining 2 different photographs together to create something really cool and visually interesting. We'll have a look at how we can do a dispersion effect, which will make your photographs and images appear like they're disintegrating. This will get you familiar with the liquify and how you can use the brush tools as well together. And finally, we'll have a look at how to create a glitch effect and make it look like your photographs are glitching out. And you know, everything that we have learned is going to be put to test in this final lesson, but it'll be worth it because you are going to have some tremendous skills and some really cool images at the end of it all. So your challenge then for this penultimate lesson is very straightforward. Restore an old photograph. So if you can get your hands on, ideally on one that's personal to you that you can restore, because it make a great gift for somebody, or you can use the one that was displayed in this lesson. Okay, just simply restore an old photo and show us the results at facebook.com/Shaw Academy. And I mentioned at the start as well about putting some links in for you to test out your your color perception as well. So you can do the X-ray hue test, which is very, very tough. The mental floss one there, the color perception one, is also extremely tough as well. I found it very, very difficult. There's a color blindness test as well. If you're curious about that, do check that out. And if you do happen to suffer from color blindness, there's a link there as well that you can check out to set up Photoshop for yourself so that you can get the most out of it. Now, so I hope that you enjoyed that lesson. But let me ask you a question. Just before we finish up, I want you to think back to why you are here. Why did you register and sign up for this course in the first place? What did you want to achieve when you joined this course from the outset? What are your reasons for wanting to complete this course? Are you a self-improver? Are you doing this course just simply because you want to learn some Photoshop skills to help you just improve with your photography, perhaps with your graphic design, perhaps with your illustration, or you just want to get some extra skills? If that's the case, I recommend that if you're thinking about moving on and completing the course, to check out our 3-month and 6-month options. The 3-month option will allow you to move on to modules 2, 3 and 4 and complete those modules in plenty of time. Or if you wanted to give yourself a little bit more time, you could go with a 6-month option and might maybe even check out another course as well. Perhaps you have ambitions greater than that. Perhaps you are an aspirer and you want to do a little bit more with your Photoshop and make a secondary income for yourself, or integrate it as part of a broader skill set. If that's the case, I recommend you check out our 6 to 12 month options. This will give you plenty of time to complete this course, but also to move on and to check out some of our other courses, like my photography course. You might have a look at our graphic design course, our illustrator course. There's just so many courses related to Photoshop that you can move on to. Or perhaps you want to look at something outside of Photoshop altogether and maybe have a look at our marketing course or even our nutrition course. You'd be able to do all of them within the 12 or 6 months. Perhaps from the outset your goal was very clear and you want to become a professional. And if that's the case, I strongly recommend going with the 12-month plan. This will give you all the time that you need to gain your diploma in this course, to gain your diploma in other courses like Photoshop, like photography, like marketing, like graphic design, other design related courses or technology courses. Or perhaps you are an entrepreneur and you're thinking about starting a business for yourself. If that's the case, you can also go the professional route and take the 12-month option. Or perhaps you just like to manage things quite closely and you can also take it month by month, simply going with our standard monthly subscription. Whatever option suits you best or whatever your goal is, all you need to do is just click to upgrade in your student login area. Now, Module 2 starts next week, so it starts very, very soon. Really, really exciting. Have you got your place yet? Have you secured your place? Places are running out, so do remember there is only a limited amount of space on our extra modules. So give yourself enough time to complete this course to move on to modules 2, 3 and 4. The majority of students who move on with us go with a 6 to 12 month membership to allow themselves enough time to complete their goals. So you know our mission now at this stage. For you, we want to give you convenient, flexible, affordable, interactive education that's internationally recognized, and it's higher education at a lower cost, so you can learn in your own way. As I've mentioned before, upgrading could not be easier. All you need to do is click the whichever option suits you best within your student login area. Just a simple one click and that's it, you're done. There's nothing else to worry about and you can start enjoying other courses straight away. Now, so that is the end of lesson number 7. Just one lesson left to go. Lesson number 8. Make sure to join me for it. Really exciting lesson. Lots of very cool things to show you. So be sure to attend. And until then, take care of yourselves. Bye bye.